Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. As promised, today we're going to be going over the edits I did on that recent video I put up on photographing a kitchen, getting portfolio shots so we can showcase our work on our website and share on social media. So let's take a look at some of the images and let's take a look at what it really took to get this dialed in. So this first image here is our one-point perspective of this beautiful kitchen space. As you can see, we have the light coming in from the left side, and I'm going to show you guys pretty much when we blend this in Photoshop, how we take, the flash files and the ambient files, and we blend this together to get the final image. A lot of this was looking really, really good in camera, but I knew that there were certain things about it that I didn't like. For instance, I didn't like in certain areas of the scene, the shadows were kind of hard. So by blending in some of the ambient, I can kind of fix that so we get something a little more softer and not so hard for the final result. This next image here, this one we went a little bit more moodier, right? We were just having fun, creating a nice little vignette here, a little tight composition, letting you feel the emotion of the space rather than just documenting it, right? So here we get to really play with the light and help to tell a better story, kind of like a tease, right? We're kind of teasing the image and just showing the best bits of it rather than just giving it all. So here we had that parabolic softbox on the grid, and that grid is what's giving that nice beautiful light coming in from that top left direction, hitting those cabinets and then spilling onto the hood and the stove and the middle of the island there, creating this nice, beautiful moody light, which I love. Now, like I said, these first two images here, these two are actually a little bit more built up in Photoshop. They weren't really in camera because I knew that I want to blend in some of that ambient on top of this to really polish the image to make it look good. Now, these next images here is what I consider light farming, which we talked about in that previous video. Getting it pretty much in camera. None of these next four images were brought into Photoshop. This was all done in Lightroom, adding a little bit of global adjustments, leveling out the image, and that's it, which I love because it makes our job fast on site and even back in post quick, so we can deliver this fast for ourselves or our client. So we have just a couple nice compositions, capturing the scene with the light coming towards the camera rather than the light coming from behind the camera. So it's not a flat scene, something with a little bit more directionality that helps us, feel the weight of the elements in the scene. And that's it. This is our last image here. Just pretty much, if you guys remember, in that video, we were just handheld going around finding compositions and, calling it a day without having to waste so much time on site, and also saving us time back in post. So yeah, these are pretty much the images that we're going to be covering today. Let's take a look at the actual process of working on these in Lightroom and Photoshop and creating that final deliverable image for ourselves to showcase in our portfolio. So here we are in Lightroom, and on this first image here, as you can see, there's a couple things that I want to tackle, right? On site, if you recall, we had this right side area there that was kind of bright, right? I didn't like how bright that was because I wanted a nice transition of bright to dark. Right now in this image, as you can see, it goes from bright to dark and then kind of starts going bright again, which I didn't like. That's when we added that negative fill. And as you can see with the negative fill, it kind of sells that darkness that I'm trying to achieve here on the right side of this kitchen area. Like I said, on site, we're just getting all the frames that we need so that way we can make our job easier back in post. So I'm just bringing in here and just adding a couple, little settings, like white balance, nothing really major because for the most part, it looked really good in camera. The rest of the stuff will kind of polish up in Photoshop. But for the most part, we're just trying to get everything dialed in so color looks consistent in Lightroom. And then that way we can bring all these layers into Photoshop and blend this whole thing together. We also have our ambient file here. This is so that way we can, have information so that if I want to bring in some, some of the softer shadows here, I can do that. If I want to, fix the window view, I can do that by bringing this in and masking it out or masking it in, things like that. So let's open this up in Photoshop so you guys can kind of see what I mean by blending this image together so we get that final polished image so we can deliver and put it on our portfolio. So here we are in Photoshop, and as the base layer, my starting off point, this is pretty much my base layer. It's a neutral layer for me to start off and build this layer up, fixing the things that I don't like. Number one, as you can see, remember, I don't like this right side area, so I'm gonna, brush in that negative fill and just have a little bit more darkness here on the right side. It's a little bit hot and bright here on the left side area where the light's coming in. We're going to fix that, bring in the window view. Also, these shadows here, if you notice on the back of this kitchen, it's a little bit hard, right? Like, I don't like how hard that shadow is. Even though it's soft, there's some softness there, but I want a little bit more softer. Like, you see how soft the top area is up here? I love that. And the lights here, that's really nice. Just the back area here, I just want to add some more softness. Maybe by bringing in some of the ambient, we can do that. And then other than that, as you can see, we have all these crazy can lights, these pimples on our screen, which I definitely want to remove. You know, make this a nice clean image where we don't have all these distractions here. So yeah, let's get to it. This is our base layer. Like I said, this is my starting off point, and after that, I'm going to start building it up. My next images I'm going to bring in are my flash and ambient. So as you can see, if we start from here, first things first, let's tackle this left side area here where it's a little bit too bright. So by bringing in another image here where we actually have a darker exposure of our ISO, we kind of dropped our light power so that we have a little bit more darkness here. And then by just brushing that in, we're able to just, you know, bring that in and make it look seamless without any kind of distractions. As you can see, before and after, just showing you guys adding a little bit of that darkness there. Here's another image here. Remember, I did not like the right side of this kitchen area, so I'm going to bring in this other image here, which is that negative fill. So if you remember in the image, in the negative fill, there was a shot that I actually was able to move the negative fill out of the composition so you don't see it, but it still creates that darker right side area here. So this is before and after. You see how we have that darkness on the right side of the kitchen area? That's perfect. Next, I wanted to just bring a little bit more darkness there. So by adding a curves layer and then just brushing that in, I'm just darkening up that right side area. So as you can see, I'm just adding a little bit more darkness there. So before, after, it's very, very subtle, but it does the job. Next here, same thing. I wanted to bring some more darkness, even though there's plenty of information, but I'm really trying to make sure this image is nice and clean, right? So by adding in some more darkness here on the left side, we're bringing in a darker exposure and just brushing that in. So as you can see, this is the area I brushed in, which is highlighted. So that's before and after. Now, this is where, if you remember, I was talking about I did not like the shadows here. So if you look, see the shadows here on coming off these lights here? I don't really like that. Even here on this little like cutting board, I don't like that shadow. So by bringing in an ambient layer, I'm kind of softening all that out. See that? So this is actually, if we go back to full screen, you can see this is actually one of the ambient frames here that we're bringing in. But all we're bringing in is just these areas. So here I wanted a little bit of a softer shadow on the right side cabinetry here. Same thing with the lights. I want a little bit more softer, and definitely where these lights are, a little bit more of a softer shadow pattern. So if I take that off, you see how much more darker and harder that is? And now it's a little bit more softer, right? So this is just something that, to my eye, I wanted to have a little bit more of a softer transition of light. And then after that, we added a curves here, just brought up the value. So just a little bit brighter. It's like a touch, just a hair. And then if you remember, we talked about, there's no way to avoid this, these bars here in the frame in our composition. So using generative fill, I was able to pretty much easily just get a nice clean image without that being a distraction in our composition. So that's before and after generative fill. That's the nice clean image we have. And then, so that's pretty much our flash and ambient, right? So if we take that off and on, this is our base image, and then adding in our flash and ambient files, this is what we come up with. Now, next, I want to tackle the exterior. If you look here, you can see we actually are reflecting that scrim we had placed outside. That's reflecting into the glass of our window here, which we don't like. So by bringing in an ambient frame, we can easily just add a mask around it. So this dark ambient frame is what we're going to use to mask in. So by doing that, we just make a selection around the windows and then add a mask. So that's before and after. Next, we just raise that value up. It's a little bit too dark. So by adding a curve, so we bring up the values there. And then it's very subtle, but there's a little bit of a difference of color between the open window and the glass. So I just did a hue saturation to just blend those two together. So it looks a little bit more symmetrical as far as the colors go. Next, cleanup. Now remember, we have those ugly pimples on the screen, these can lights. We do not like that at all, right? So just going through the scene slowly and just cleaning that up so we have a nice, clean, polished image. So if we look at the before and after, look at that. Before and after, how much of a difference that makes in the image to just avoid any distractions. Your eye just goes straight to the kitchen without getting distracted with all the can lights in the ceiling. So if you see here, if I make the selection, you can see pretty much all this is where I use the remove tool to just pretty much take out all these can lights. I also use the remove tool. If you look at the window here, because we have that open window, if I take this off, we have the window frames actually coming into the reflection. So by adding, by using the remove tool, we can also polish that and clean that up. And that's pretty much it. So that's our cleanup layer here. So like I said, before, after, and then lastly, here's our color. So we had a little bit of yellows here I didn't like. So I just did a hue saturation, pick the yellows, drop that down, and then use the brush to just kind of kill some of the yellow on the floor here and the ceiling. So if you look at where I brushed, I kind of just brushed these areas. So remove some of the yellow that was coming into our composition. So if I take that off and on, hopefully you guys can see it. But that's before. You can see some of the yellow there in the scene. And that's after. So notice the floor and ceiling, how we're kind of removing that color coming into our composition. And then lastly, after that, it's a little bit dark here, so easily fixed with a curves layer. We just add some exposure there. And then my last little touch here, we do a linear contrast that just adds a little bit of micro contrast to the image and just helps to just give it a little bit of a pop. So all we're doing is going to our curves here and clicking here where it says linear contrast. And that really adds a nice little S-curve. That S-curve, as you can see, if I take it off and on, adds that micro contrast into the scene, adding that touch of pop and helping everything just, stand out a little bit more. And that's it. So once that's done, we save that, go back into Lightroom. And the only other thing I did here is, if you notice, we have our image here where we don't need so much floor and ceiling. So going with the 16:9 crop, I'm eliminating some of that floor and ceiling so we get all the attention just straight to the kitchen. So we're not getting distracted with all that dead space there. It's a lot of negative space that we don't really need. So nice 16:9 crop. And then we did level out the image here. So if we go to our grid lines here, as you can see, I use these lines to place where I think it should be nice and straight for the vertical and horizontal. I use the wall here and the window frame here for the verticals, and then the cabinets, the top of the cabinet there, and the tile pattern on the floor to give me the nice horizontal line. And that helped to level this thing out. As you can see, if I take that off, see that before and after, it just really levels it out, makes it a nice symmetrical image. And then besides that, the image was a little bit cool. So if you notice, if I take this off, you see it's a little bit cool there. So I just add a little bit of warmth, and that just made it feel a little bit better to me. I wanted just a touch of warmth there. And then Drop the highlights down just to here, open up the shadows just a little bit, added some blacks, clarity and texture, and that's pretty much it. We have this polished image from where we went on site, flashed it, took our ambient brackets, brought it back into Lightroom and Photoshop, built it up, and this is the final image that I have now in my portfolio. So that's our first image. Let's go to our second image over here. As you can see, this one's a little bit more moodier, right? A little bit more darker versus that first image where it was a little bit more brighter. But let's take a look at this one as well. So just like before, we had all our files here, different light coming into the scene, different exposure, so that we could take back into Photoshop and build this up. So just like before, my bottom layer here, which is my base layer, is the image that looks as close as possible to what I have envisioned for the end result. And then after that, I kind of build this up until I get that final polished image that I've created. So the next layer I have here is the scrim light. If you remember, if I take this off, we put the scrim on it and it helped to create a better, softer light where I can use that to kind of help sell that softness that I'm trying to achieve without it being too hard. So I can bring in, like here, you see the softer shadows coming off there? I like that a lot better. So if you look at, that's before, you see how much harder that is? I don't like that. So by bringing in the scrim light and by just brushing in where I want it, I can bring in those softer shadows and I can actually bring in some more exposure to this plant sitting over there on the island. So if I take that off and on, you can see the difference that made. Next, we had another light here. This is where we had the grid coming into the frame, but I liked what it was doing with the chairs here. I like how dark that is, because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to draw you into the frame. So by having the foreground dark, it's not keeping your attention there. By having it dark, it's allowing you to get past those chairs and into the middle of the composition. So by brushing in these darker chairs, I'm trying to sell that look, right? Now, if you remember, we had the negative fill to help, make that dark side of the right side of this area darker, but I forgot to do that on this tighter vignette. So what I'm doing in Photoshop is I'm just going to select these chairs, add a curves layer to it, and then just drop it down. So if I take that off and on, it helps to give me that darker chairs that I'm looking for versus it being so bright. I mean, obviously it's not that bright, but I want it a little bit more moodier. So by selecting those chairs and dropping the exposure with curves, I can do that. Now, there's still a little bit more brighter on the right side area here. These two chairs are still bright. So the next thing I did is I just made a selection for just that area there, clipped it to the layer underneath it, and then just added a curve just for those two. So as you can see before and after, that kind of helps to clean it out and make it look a little bit more consistent as far as the darkness on those chairs. And then we have a color layer here. If you look at the top of the frame, you may not be able to notice it, but I can see it. There's some yellows there. So all I did is go to the yellows, drop that down, and then add a brush and just paint it in this area that's highlighted so that we kind of kill some of that yellow. So that's before and after. And then obviously that image is a little bit too dark. So by adding a curves, we can raise the value of the exposure. That feels a lot more better. And then lastly, like on that previous image, we added a linear contrast just to add that little touch of pop into the image. And that's it. That's all that we needed to do for this one in Photoshop. Save it, bring it back into Lightroom. And then the only thing we did here was make sure we did the same thing, level out the image. So we have our grid lines here to make sure we have a nice leveled out image. And then as far as global adjustments go, pretty much it looked really, really good. The only thing I needed to do was just drop the highlights down just a tad. And that's pretty much it. Nice, clean image without having to do too much work back in Photoshop or Lightroom. Now let's take a look at our last final images here. Remember, these ones were pretty much all in camera with not needing to go into Photoshop at all. So as you guys can see here, pretty much I just made sure the white balance was correct. I added some exposure so we can make it a little bit darker. This one was a little bit bright. Drop the highlights down, open up the whites, drop the blacks down, added some texture and clarity. As far as my mask here, I did bring in a linear gradient here so we can sell that directionality of light coming from left to right. And then I think on the top here, I dropped the saturation down because I wanted to kill some of the yellow. So I think that helped with that. So if you look at that mask, if we take it off, you see how it's a little bit bright, but by adding that linear gradient, we're selling that directionality of light. And then other than that, like I said, we leveled out the image, and then that looks good. That's pretty much done, mostly in camera with a little bit of settings in Lightroom. Same thing with our next image here. A couple global adjustments to make sure we had a good white balance for the image. Open up the exposure just a little bit to brighten it up. Drop the highlights down, open up the shadows, added texture and clarity. Same thing before, we leveled out the image, as you can see here, so we have a nice aligned image. And that's it, nice clean image. We didn't need to do any kind of linear gradient. I already like the directionality here in this scene. Here's a 2-point. Now with this one, we can't align it on the the horizontal, but we can align the vertical. So as you can see, I'm using the vertical lines here to make sure we have a nice straight image so it doesn't look like it's leaning over. And then other than that, we did drop the exposure down a bit because it was kind of bright. If you look at the original, kind of bright here, right? So by just dropping it down, since we have a raw image, we can recover that information. So we just dropped the exposure, dropped the highlights, opened up the shadows just a tad, added some blacks, texture and clarity. And other than that, we did add a nice little vignette here. So as you can see, if I take this off, it was a little bit too dark there, so I wanted to brighten it up. So adding a linear gradient and just raising the exposure kind of helps to balance out the image so it's not so dark there. And that's it for this image. I think that looks pretty good. And lastly, we have this image here, a little bit more of a wider vignette where you get to see the chairs along with the kitchen itself. Same thing, we just made sure we had our white balance correct, dropped the exposure down just a tad, highlights, blacks, texture, clarity, made sure we had a nice aligned image by adding our grid lines here. And then other than that, as far as the mask goes, we did add a couple things here. On the left side there, it was still a little bit bright, so I just used the mask to kind of kill some of the highlights there on the left side. And also we used the mask to kind of kill some of the color here. There were some yellows here in this area. So if you notice, if I take that off and on, you can see how it's a little bit yellow there. And by desaturating that, we kind of clean that up. And that's it. I hope you guys found that helpful. I didn't go into the full in-depth of, how to create a mask, how to do a selection, how to do a curves layer, how to do all that kind of stuff. I figured you guys can just Google that, YouTube it. You can find out exactly how to do it. I just wanted to make this a quick video so you guys can see exactly how I built up some of the images that required some work in Photoshop and how I added the settings to the images that was pretty much dialed in, and just a couple little tweaks here in Lightroom to get it finally nice and polished. And for any of you out there who didn't get to see the actual video of me on site shooting this space, take a look at the video here. It covers the entire process of what it did for me to get these images so I could take it back into Lightroom and Photoshop to finish and create that polished image. So thanks again everybody for watching this video, and if you have any questions, just leave a comment down below. I love responding to all your comments. And until next time guys, remember, keep on shooting. I'll see you then.